You're sitting in a doctor's office. You've been waiting for a minute. The door opens. The doctor walks in, sits down, looks at the chart for a second, not at you, and says, "It looks like we've been dealing with this for a while now." And then the doctor looks up and says, "What are we hoping to accomplish today?" Nothing aggressive, kind of standard. Nothing weird really happened, but something moved there in your psychology. I want you to catch what it was. That first line that the doctor said to you, that is a frame. So it plants the idea that this problem is ongoing. It also says that everything is shared. It says we, not you. So that situation carries weight. You didn't agree to any of that stuff, but your nervous system filled in all the blanks as truth. So then the question the doctor asks, what are we hoping to accomplish today? That's obviously not a real question. It tells you the scope of what you're allowed to desire, what you can want. It already assumes there's a shared goal with a little fence around it. So you walk in as this person with a body and a question or two. 10 seconds later, you're a collaborative patient that was working on a team-managed problem with very limited objectives. So all those moments use the exact same architecture to come together. It's a statement that sets the frame and a question that locks you inside of it. We did it for years, hundreds of rooms, thousands of conversations. So by the end of tonight, you will see it, and you're gonna see it everywhere. Here's where most people start off when they try to take control of a conversation. They ask a question. That's usually the whole move. They walk into a room, a doctor's office, negotiation, a meeting with somebody who outranks them, let's say. So what are we told by so many leaders and stuff? Ask better questions. The person asking the questions controls the conversation. You've heard that before. Probably every sales book out there, every leadership seminar, all that kind of communication course kind of stuff. And it's absolutely wrong. It's totally wrong. Questions do matter, but a question by itself and is what I will call a naked question, strip naked question with nothing in front of it. It doesn't really control anything. So all the naked question does is operate inside of whatever frame is already running. And in most places, that frame might not belong to you. And if you think about this for 1 second, you walk into a doctor's office and say, "Can you explain what's going on with my blood work?" Great question, right? It's reasonable, it's super clear, and it does just about nothing to really change the dynamic. You're a patient requesting information from an authority. So the frame was set the moment you sat down in that chair and your question is confirmed. So you're asking from below. It's the same thing in a corporate environment. You're in a meeting, some VP, senior person, and you say, what's the priority on this project going forward? Or what's the deadline here? Great question, but all it does is reinforce that the VP decides the priority and you are the one receiving an answer, right? So the question didn't take anything. It gave something away. It gave away your frame, your position. And if you go some more higher stakes, blah, 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 and you say, what would it take to settle this before we go to trial? So you just showed your hand, right? That's a naked question. All 5 of these kind of do something different. They kind of set someone up for a different type of frame, and each one of these kind of makes a category of question possible. So the first type is pacing. And pacing is the simplest and probably the most powerful. So a pacing statement describes what is already observably true. That's all it does. You're stating a reality as it is. It's something the other person they can see it, they can feel it, they probably already know it, or they're absolutely going to agree with it. The reason that this is so powerful is kind of simple here. You say something true, the nervous system says, yep, internally. There's this little micro agreement that happens below our awareness. And once that little yes is running, whatever comes next can ride on it, especially if it's a question. So an example of this might be a boss coming in and saying, we've we've been going back and forth on this for a couple of weeks now. That's pacing, right? So you call it whatever you want, but it's just true. And because it's true, there's nothing to resist. The other person's critical faculty has no desire to activate or turn on. They hear it, they agree internally. Whatever comes next is kind of already in agreement mode a little bit. And when they realize it's a question, they get forced into the frame. Let's do a corporate setting really quick. So let's say a boss comes in, or let's say you are walking in talking to people and you say, you know what, the team hit every benchmark on the last 2 quarters. And now you've asked, what would need to be true to expand the budget for next quarter? So that question without the pacing statement sounds like you're asking for money. With the pacing statement, it sounds like the logical next step. So the brain kind of grabs onto it a little bit. The statement did all the work, the question just walks through the door. Type number 2 is alignment. And you're like, oh, alignment kind of sounds like pacing. It's different because pacing is describing reality. Alignment describes a shared intent or a common desired outcome, if you want to say it that way. You're telling the other person before they've committed to anything that both of you are on the same side. So what this does neurologically, it collapses that adversarial frame. So the moment someone hears, you know, we're trying to solve the same problem, even if they haven't agreed to that yet, their nervous system starts framing into cooperation mode. And they didn't decide to. The frame told them to do that. So like an example is like, I want to make sure we're both getting what we need out of this. Simple, calm, does something very specific. It makes it almost impossible for the other person to be really adversarial without looking stupid. Because you basically just shared a declared purpose. So if they push back, they're pushing back against collaboration. And right after that, what would it look like if we cut one initiative to protect the other 3? But with that statement, you become a strategic thinker type of person. An alignment statement doesn't mean that they agree that we're sharing a fact. They'll agree that we have something in common. All right, so type number 3 is resonance statements. And this is the one probably, I would assume most people will probably mess up because it requires you to actually see the other person. Like to see what they're carrying into the room and name it before that person names it. So what we're really doing is reflecting the other person's internal state, their priority, their frustration, maybe something they're pissed off about, showing that to them. And when you do that accurately, something happens that you can literally watch. Their shoulders are going to drop. You can see this. Their breathing changes because somebody just told them they don't have to fight to be understood, because that's what most of us walk into a room hoping. So the fight that they were preparing for kind of evaporates a little bit. In a corporate world, you might hear something like, I could be wrong, but I think you're frustrated because this is the 3rd time the scope of this project has changed and nobody has acknowledged that it cost you something every single time. And right after that, what would make this version feel worth committing to for you? So they were ready to fight, right? But we take it out of the room by naming what nobody else is going to name. Resonance is the most powerful of these 5, in my opinion. The 4th decision type. This is concession. This one's great, especially if you want to take authority and make it sound like you're not. But the frame is more powerful than everything. So we're basically giving up a little bit of ground. We're acknowledging some kind of a cost that we had to pay, or a limitation that we have, maybe a mistake that we made, or that we're going through something difficult or having a hard time doing something. And we're doing it before the other person forces us to. That means we're in charge. The reason this works so well, I think, is because it disarms a counterattack before the counterattack can be launched at all. So most people that work in super high frame environments are always ready for a fight. If you think of like the show Suits, which is about a lawyer who spends his life posturing, in full posturing, pretend alpha mode. But these people walk around braced. They have their objections. They have like a full magazine of objections ready to go. You say, what would need to be true for you to say yes to me anyway on this? So that's a question that you cannot ever ask without that concession first, right? It would sound arrogant, super arrogant. But after the concession, it sounds like the kind of direct thing that gets respect, because you earned the respect first in like 10 seconds it took you to make that statement. So the concession is never weakness. That's the one thing I just want to leave you with on this one. It's the thing that kind of earns you the right to ask a deep question or a hard question. So concessions should always come before hard questions. The fifth is presupposition. And this is the sharpest tool in the kit. And I think it's the one that people underestimate because it looks like it's doing very little. A presupposition statement embeds an assumption as a fact by treating it like it's already been established. So the assumption lives inside the language like a foundation under a house. You might say, since we're moving forward with the expansion, even though nobody said we're moving forward just yet. Hasn't been decided, but your brain kind of treats the sentence as settled depending on the environment. The other person would have to stop, back up, and explicitly challenge you. And in a corporate world, the presupposition is like, now that we've established this team can deliver at this level, what is the argument against giving us more runway on the next phase, on the next project that we do? That's why these questions become so massively powerful in setting a frame and controlling the frame and getting outcomes. Presupposition does the selling. The question just asks them to argue against something that feels already decided. Look, I know you don't want to watch another ad. I don't blame you, but I have seen this change too many lives to just let you scroll past it. There's a moment that most people have where something feels off in a conversation and we ignore it. And it's not because you're wrong, but it's just because we don't trust what we're seeing. And that's where all of this starts. NCI Level 1 isn't about learning a bunch of tricks. It's about finally understanding what you've been noticing your whole life already. You start to see behavior a lot more clearly. The body language, the emotional shifts, the intent that's behind someone's actions. So you don't guess anymore. You read what's going on. You understand what's going on. And you can actually respond with precision. Most people ignore what they see. This is where you learn to trust it. NCI 1 is a foundational course in behavior profiling, and the link is right down in the description. So the statement by itself, obviously, not going to do very much. It might land, it might not, but it doesn't require anything from the other person till we get to the question phase. The question is what forces participation. We're making the other person step inside the frame and act like it belongs to them, like it has the whole time. There's 5 types here. They move faster than the statement because once the statement's done the work, the question doesn't need to be really complicated. It doesn't need to be a complex question. So the first question is directional. In a directional question, and I know this sounds like, I've got to mix up these 2 different sets of 5, which could be, 25 possible scenarios. I promise you'll have a framework for this. And even if you screw this up, you're going to learn it in no time. It's going to be your go-to technique. Okay, so directional question points toward a conclusion without stating it. So we're building a little hallway that only goes one direction and then asking them to kind of walk. What do you think happens to the team if we keep running at this pace for another 6 months? We don't say the team's going to burn out. They arrived at the answer themselves. It's their conclusion now. They're going to own it. So you didn't argue anything. You're not pushing anybody. You're just pointing and letting their brain do all the rest of the work. It's the power of a directional question. If you say, if we don't address this in the next quarter, where is that going to leave us going into the next fiscal year? All right, so type number 2 is the assumptive question. The assumptive question jumps over the decision and asks about what comes after it. So the decision itself that I want this person to make is never even questioned. It's treated as already made. So we might say, when we roll this out next month, do you want to start with the East Coast team or go like company-wide with all this? Or instead of do you want to, you ask advice. So like when we roll this out next month, do you think it would be the wisest to do it a little bit at a time or launch company-wide all at the fastest? I'm just curious because I've seen you do a lot of interesting stuff that seemed to work out before. So nobody said we're rolling this out. Nobody said it's happening next month, but the question blew past that stuff and they kind of accepted it. That's the question type that pairs probably most naturally with presupposition, right? Which probably makes sense to everybody. The statement installs a little assumption, and then the assumptive asks them to operate inside of it. But number 3 is elicitation. Elicitation is the art of getting information. Seth, you said NLP technique. What